All right, sup guys. So welcome back to the podcast. So it's been a while. Well, it's just been like 1 week hiatus since I last posted, and I did have a good reason. And some people already know about the issue that I ran into, so I'm not able to use the previous name that I used for this podcast because of legal reasons. So tentatively, right now, I'm going to say that this podcast is there's no title or there's no name to this podcast quite yet. But tentatively, if I were to actually give it, what do you call this, a title, it would be the Get Strong AF podcast. And in all probability, that might be the title that I will be going for. But there are actually other titles that I was considering. A good one was Soccer Fit by a friend of mine that I constantly talk to on Instagram. And another one would be Confucius, if you guys are familiar with that Chinese philosopher, because it's a play on my last name, Fusho, Confucius. But yeah, you get it. But yeah, in all probability, this podcast would probably be named Get Strong AF podcast. Very simple, very straightforward. Nothing, no gimmick this time, no fireplace. To those listening to Spotify, to those who have been exclusively listening to this podcast on Spotify, you wouldn't know that I normally have a virtual fireplace by my side. But this time, to those watching on YouTube, you see that that's not present. All you can see is like a plain background. I'm in one of my squat racks. I have a desk setup right here. So this will be the setup moving forward. Okay, so again, it's hard for me to say if this is the new episode 1 for the podcast. It would have been the 5th one, but nonetheless, let's finally get on with the topics that I had planned for you guys today. And it's going to be another Q&A episode. There were like 3 questions that I missed out on my previous one, and these are actually 3 very, very important questions moving forward. And I guess I'm really gonna go about it on a very conversational matter. I don't pride myself I know the science when it comes to a lot of things related to fitness, okay? Specifically related to fitness and nutrition. I know I have a good grasp on what the science says, but how I would want to communicate it, how I would want to communicate the said information is done in a very conversational matter, because for one, I can't lie to you guys. I'm not a scientist. All those big words, I probably won't be able to use those big words because I don't have, just because I'm not that kind of guy. I'm a very straightforward guy. I'm a simple guy, and hopefully how I will communicate it is simple enough for everyone to absorb as well. All right, so the 3 questions, just to lay it out, just to sequence it out for you guys today, would be, the first one would be how I view the Smith machine. So, okay, I have a lot to say about that, but again, so the first thing I'll talk about is how I view the Smith machine. The second question that I got was, how can stance width or grip width in certain movements affect the movement as a whole? And the third one, let's see here, I know I listed it. The third one would be about supplements, specifically about BCAAs. So somebody asked me on Instagram, asking me if there's any point or what's the purpose, or if there's any point of taking BCAAs. Okay, so that's our lineup for today, and I'll try to get everything done in a very simple, straightforward manner, trying not to. Hopefully, I don't reach an hour. I'm pretty sure well, you know what? I just hope I don't reach an hour. But anyway, the first thing would be how I view the Smith machine. Before I talk about how I personally view it, over the past few years, most people have started to view the Smith machine as such a negative movement. And in like past 5 years ago, if you were to meet me or ask me this 5 years ago, I would be on the same party saying that, the Smith machine is so pointless. It takes away the functional patterns that you would develop in the squat and the bench, etc. It's just pointless. It's a waste of space in the gym. I would say that. If you ask me again 5 years ago, that's definitely what I would say. And that's, until now, there are some people that still view the Smith machine on that same way, in that same framework. But I have come to my own conclusion, of course, talking to other people, is that it's hard to generalize, or it's hard to give out an extreme case like that, or extreme claim like that the Smith machine is absolutely useless and that nobody should use it. Just like everything when it comes to training, both training and nutrition, context matters so much. And of course, I understand that, a lot of these people that have those negative views towards the Smith machine, these are strength coaches who are training either powerlifters or team sports athletes slash combat sports athlete. And I do understand where they're coming from, and I do understand my previous self when I had that claim in the past, is because if you were to pick between, let's say, I'll just use the squat as the example. If you were to pick between the barbell squat and the Smith machine squat for your athlete or for your client, then hands down, you should pick that barbell squat, because generally speaking, a free weight movement, what do you call this? So when I say free weight, so that's either barbells, dumbbells, and I guess you can somewhat consider body weight, but generally speaking, when we say free weight, it's either dumbbell, any variation of a dumbbell, and any variation of a barbell, just because you're not confined within the restrictions of a machine. All right. So generally speaking, those offer a lot more benefit to your client and to your athlete, just because of the stabilization factors. Just because if you were to do a squat with a barbell, a lot of things can go wrong. Either somebody can bow forward, somebody can excessively round their backs, they can shift left or right. And that's, of course, we're not going to aim for that. But since the possibility of that happening in the barbell squat exists, that's when the benefit comes into play, because that client or that athlete of yours will have to do everything in his or her power to go against that, so that they can remain within their own strict range of motion at every single rep. So again, that's really the challenge is the benefit. The fact that you're trying to make sure that you're centered, that you're neutral, you're not shifting left or right. That's the benefit that you would that's one of the benefits that one would get from training a free weight movement, as opposed to doing a Smith machine movement. And in this specific context, we're talking about the Smith machine squat. If it's the generic or the standard Smith machine where the bar only goes straight up and down, then as you would expect, the bar has nowhere else to go except for up and down, because it's limited within the set range of motion of that machine. So yes, somebody can still round their back and cave their knees in, but that does not eliminate. But the other issues are already eliminated, such as what do you call this, shifting left and right, what do you call this, bowing excessively, like to the point that you're actually doing a good morning. Those are eliminated from the Smith machine squat. So, and time and time again, if somebody actually does the Smith machine squat exclusively, then you can expect that once you bring that client or athlete out into the real world, again, quote unquote real world, that's when you can expect a bit more, that's when you can expect a higher risk of injury, primarily because that client or athlete has not prepped him or herself, or you as his or her coach did not prep him or her to handle loads without that fixed range of motion. In other words, you did not form the stability. That client did not form the stability to handle external factors that one can possibly encounter in the real world. So a good example would be, I guess for general population clients, would be to sit up and down from a chair, especially for our senior clients. Or what do you call this, if you're coaching a football athlete, they might not have developed the hip or the hip, ankle, or knee stability to go against or to body check the athlete of the opposing team. Then of course there's a chance for that person to get injured. But again, that's an increased chance. I don't want to say that there's an 100% guarantee, but again, to go back to the context of what we're talking about, comparing a free weight machine to a free weight movement versus a machine movement, in this case a Smith machine squat versus a barbell squat, definitely you should opt for going for that free weight movement. So that's the mindset that I spent so long talking about that, but that's the mindset that I and a lot of other strength coaches and other lifters in general in the past, that's the mindset that we had. But if you were to really take it into context, we shouldn't even make those extreme cases or those extreme claims to begin with. But how do you call this? The reason why is because it does offer some benefit to some people. If you're a power lifter, probably not, because as much as possible you'd want to dedicate most of your squatting efforts to the actual barbell squat or any other variation of a barbell squat, so that it can help contribute to your overall squat strength. But then in your off season, sorry, I was talking about in season, like when you're really close to your competition or really close to your meet. But in off season, you can probably do it if you're, especially if you're that type of power lifter. When you squat, you tend to, it's so obvious that your back is strong but your legs are weak. Maybe the Smith machine squat can be good for you, just because you will be able to focus a lot more on developing your quads as opposed to your back. Since when you do the Smith machine, you're not going to be risking your lower back to take over so much, because you know that without a doubt, since you're in a Smith machine, all your reps will be consistent, and each rep your quads will be able to contribute as much as you want. So that's something that you can do, but specifically under the context that you're doing this on your off season and not when you're 1 week out of your competition, because that's definitely going to screw you over. That's going to screw you over in your technique. That's going to screw you over in your that's it, your technique. So that's in the context of a power lifter. If we're gonna talk about, let's say, a basketball player, yes, I would definitely recommend the fact for you to do the free weight movement as well. The free weight body weight squat, or sorry, the barbell squat. But you can still definitely do the Smith machine if you, same case as a power lifter, if you're in the off season and if you really feel like your legs are so underdeveloped. You might want to use the Smith machine as an accessory. Oh yeah, that's one thing that I forgot. The Smith machine, the previous claim is that you should never ever touch the Smith machine. The argument that I'm trying to share with you guys now is that you can use the Smith machine. Absolutely, do not shun it away, but I would never recommend it to be your main movement of the day. It's not like you're gonna head to the gym, warm up, and then Coach Fusho or Fusho says that the Smith machine is fine, then you're gonna do all your movements there. No, I'm still definitely going to recommend that majority of your movements, especially your main movements of the day, still be done with big compound or free weight compound movements, not the Smith machine. The Smith machine should still be reserved as a good accessory. And let's just, to give it into another perspective, the reason why I still recommend the free weight movement to be the main movement is because we do need those stabilization muscles to work for you. A good example would be a bench press. If there's a study, of course I don't have the link to it, I just know I read it in the past, but there's a study comparing the barbell bench press and the Smith machine bench press. Generally speaking, the only real difference in muscle activation was the fact that your lateral deltoid or the medial deltoid wasn't stimulated when it came to the Smith machine bench press. That's because obviously with that fixed range of motion, you are not, you're not stabilizing. You don't even have to think about stabilizing so much with the Smith machine, just because you're already there within that fixed range of motion. As opposed to the barbell bench press, a lot of things can go wrong. It can go too far up, it can go sideways, it can go too far down. There's a lot of things that can go wrong, and your medial deltoid or your side delt is one of the muscles that will contribute in stabilizing. So to go back to the point, I know, you know what, a while ago I said I'm not gonna try to take so long, but at this rate, it's been like how many minutes in? A lot of minutes in, and I'm only in the first question. But anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, the bench press. Do the bench press as the barbell bench press as your main movement. But if you feel like you're really lacking in either your pecs or your front deltoid or your triceps, then definitely if you're too tired already from your barbell bench press, you can definitely add in the Smith machine bench press. You can actually change the grip. If you did a regular grip in your barbell bench press, then you can experiment, try out the close grip on the Smith machine bench press, and I'm pretty sure that you're definitely gonna feel it a lot more on your triceps, especially something like that. Basically, what I'm trying to say with this is that you should not shun away the Smith machine. It's never ever, again, in my opinion now, and relatively it's shared the same. There's a similarity from my opinion 5 years ago, is that it shouldn't be done as a main movement, but it can definitely help you out as an accessory, as one of your accessories. I'm not saying that all your accessories have to be there, but it's something that can definitely help in regards to adding on to your goals. Whether you're a power lifter or an athlete, And especially if you're a bodybuilder, yes, stability in the long run, like in the main scope or grand scheme of things, stability isn't super duper 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 important for a bodybuilder. It's still important, but not as important to those other athletes, primarily because for them, what matters the most is that they're really, what do you call this, making sure that they're targeting the right muscles. And it's in within those bodybuilders or within those clients or athletes that really do prioritize hypertrophy. That's when you can really go into the Smith machine, and you can definitely bet that the quality of the reps are going to be a lot more consistent. And if the quality of the reps are a lot more consistent, that's quality volume that they're gathering for themselves. Hence, better, what do you call this, better volume, better results moving forward. Because as most people already know, volume is really one of the biggest driving factors when it comes to your progress, both in strength and in hypertrophy. Okay, so there's a lot of things you can say about that even more or in more depth. But generally speaking, what I wanted to say from this conversation is that don't go away. Like the moment you see the Smith machine, don't treat it as a what do you call this, clothing rack. Treat it as a good machine. Treat it as an accessory. And I guess here's one phrase or thinking or thought. Here's one thought that I thought about that can help you guys put things into picture a bit better. A lot of, or to go against the what do you call this, what other coaches would say in the past, is that if you are so against the Smith machine, then you should also be against every single machine in the gym. If your argument against the Smith machine is because it's a fixed range of motion, there's no stability involved, or anything that revolves around those two, then anyone can use that same argument for all the other machines you'd see in the gym. So if that's the case, if you hate the Smith machine, you should never do the leg press. You should never make your athlete do the shoulder press or the chest press or any other machine that provides a fixed range of motion, because that's the argument that they're presenting. And if you were to use that argument against them as well for all the other movements, then that's when you're going to see, oh, then maybe that's not how we should be thinking, right? So that's the thing. If somebody's against the Smith machine because of the fixed range of motion and the stability, etc., then you should never ever catch them using a machine of any sorts. All right, so that's something that you guys can use against them, because that's basically what they're saying. And yeah, you guys get the point. That you get the drift. I spent like 20 minutes already talking about the Smith machine. Okay, all right. Moving on to the next question. All right, so the second question is going to be about stance width and grip width. Are there any differences when you do a certain grip width or stance width, and which one should you coach your client or your athlete to do? All right, so to keep it short and simple, in the hope that I actually do, unlike when I talked about the Smith machine, but to keep things short and simple, what I would basically say in regards to recommending what stance width or grip width to do, just pick whatever is comfortable for you. That's really it. Because the reason why I'm saying that is because you and I and everyone else, all of our bodies, our bone structures, our structures are different from one another. If I were able to pull out my hip bone and pull your hip bone out, and if we were to compare it, then absolutely it's gonna look absolutely different. All right, so, and because of that, and we can also use that example for our shoulder blades, or like all whatever bone or joint that you want to present to compare, they're always gonna be different. And because of that point, you cannot expect that everyone should be able to feel comfortable with a certain grip width or stance width the same as everyone else. Everyone is going to have a certain preference in regards to how wide or narrow they should squat, how wide or narrow they should deadlift in terms of their stance, or how wide or narrow they should hold the bar in the overhead press or the bench press or anything. All of those will be entirely preferential, because of course, if you were to force a certain width to somebody and that somebody cannot handle that, you're just really spelling out disaster in the long run. You're probably going to injure that client of yours moving forward. And of course, that's not something that anyone would want to see, or that's just something that we just want to avoid as much as possible. We don't want anyone hurt. So in regards to the recommendation, I kept it short. pick whatever you're comfortable with, so that you can really progress. Because if you just force, or if you have the concept in your head that, oh, I heard that people bench a lot more when they do the wide grip, so I should, as a power lifter, and since the goal of the game is to lift as much weight, then I should be using wide grip as much as possible. But what if your shoulder joint doesn't work that way? What if it cannot hold that grip for a long period of time, or especially when you've loaded, what do you call this, 90+% of your one rep max? You're probably gonna wreck your shoulders, all because you forced a grip width that you can't handle. No matter how good your form is, no matter how well you retract your scapula, if your joints aren't just built that way to handle that technique, you're just not gonna make it. And in the long run, if you get hurt, then you're not going to be able to lift for how many days, or how many weeks, or God forbid how many months and years. Diba? Okay, so of course now you can hear my Filipino coming out, but what do you call this? But that's something that I want everyone to know, is that just because you heard that this grip or this stance width is allows you to lift more weight, that doesn't mean that's gonna allow you to lift more weight in the long run. You have to find out the grip width and stance width that works for you. Just because, oh, the number one lifter in my weight class lifts this way, then you should copy that, you should mimic that person. No, don't. Do what you feel like you are strongest in, just because you're experimenting. And of course, yeah, that's another way. How to find out what's your preference? Experiment. Try out narrow, try out wide, try out in the middle, then experiment. Okay, I feel good here, I feel good here, but I feel best at a certain width. That's the width, that's your sweet spot. That's the one that you should stick with moving forward. And yes, absolutely. After you've been lifting for months and years, that grip width, in terms of how smooth or how good it feels like, it might change, because you might gain a few more muscles surrounding that specific joint in your shoulders, in your hips, etc. Or maybe you lost flexibility or mobility, or maybe you increased mobility, flexibility, and your preference changed. Yeah, it will change. But then once you do feel like, oh wait, this grip of mine doesn't feel as good as it did before, what do I do now? You find out what works for you. If a wide grip was working for you for a year, and then the moment the next training block comes in and it feels absolutely crap, and you feel like your recovery is well, your programming is well, then maybe just because your leverage has changed, you might have to transition from wide grip to medium grip. Don't make a drastic change that from wide grip you're gonna go immediately to close grip. No, try to feel it out, like half an inch narrower, something like that. So that's how I would recommend in regards to finding out, or like that's how I'd recommend what stance width or grip width anyone should go. Feel it out. It's entirely preferential. Don't be pressured just because someone lifts this certain way that you should mimic that person exactly. Find out what works for you. Find out what works for your joints. All right. So knowing those things already, what are the actual differences when it comes to how narrow or how wide you would go? I guess this one's for sure a short conversation. When it comes to let's talk about just the power lifts, the squat, bench, deadlift, because I guess that's when people are really trying to be very particular when it comes to the width of their stance or the grip. Okay, in regards to the squat, generally speaking, and again, I do have to say that whatever I'm going to say after, like following this, is generally speaking, because again, as I mentioned a while ago, everything really is entirely dependent on your structure and your preference. But anyway, just to answer the question, for the squat, when it comes to your stance, the wider you go, the more glute activation that you might experience, and opposed to that, the narrower you go, the more quad activation you might experience. Again, I know I'm really trying to refrain. I'm really trying to refrain from giving black and white answers. So it's always going to be, it depends, but generally speaking, if you're squatting wide, you are going to be using less quads and more glutes. And if you're going to go narrow, you are something's in my throat. But generally speaking, if you are going to go narrow in your squats, the more quads and the less glutes you might experience or you might stimulate when you're actually doing the movement. Again, those are general terms or general precautions that you might experience. For the bench press, this one's a bit tricky. When you are I don't know what's wrong with my throat right now. But in the narrow, close grip bench press, generally speaking, you are going to activate your triceps and your front delts a lot more. Not so much on your chest, because it's generally speaking in the wide grip or in the medium to wider grip for the bench press. That is when your chest is supposed to be activated a bit more. But here's the thing. Here's something that I'm actually kind of confused about. If anyone here watching this video or listening to the podcast, keep on burping, or if anyone knows, the thing that I'm wondering about is that people say that the wider you hold the bench, or like the wider your grip is in the bench, the more chest activated it would be. All right, so I understand that, especially when you're wide, you are going to definitely at the very bottom of the lift, you are going to experience that your pec is at a really stretched position. Okay, so naturally, I would definitely agree that for sure you are using your pecs more in a wider grip. But then, if you were to analyze when you're actually pressing, your chest isn't really that contracting that much. So that's the thing that I'm wondering. Yes, sure. I mean, you are going to have a greater stretch when you do a wide grip bench press. But what I'm wondering now is that if it's actually going to contribute so much. Yes, I know that, if you have stronger pecs, you are going to have a stronger bench to some degree, sure. But then, is your bench really going to... Sorry, are your pecs really contributing so much more when it comes to actually pressing it off your chest? But I mean, because you guys can imagine it, especially to the guys that are watching this video now, I'm demonstrating it, that if you have a wide bench, then if you go here, yes, you get that full stretch. But then when you extend it, when you're actually pushing, you'll notice that it's really your triceps that are moving. So that's the thing. Yes, your chest is moving, but is it actually working more? All right, so that's the thing that I'm gonna ask you guys. Do let me know what you think about that. So whoever has the answer, do let me know. All right, that's for the bench. Moving forward to the deadlift. I guess what we can the difference that we'll be talking about is the conventional deadlift versus the sumo deadlift. Now this one's a bit obvious, especially if you're somebody who's actually tried both variations. The conventional deadlift does use your lower back a lot more, just because that, and it can't be helped, you are going to be bowed over, you are going to be hinged over quite a lot more compared to the sumo deadlift, because in the sumo deadlift you are more upright. And because of how, I'm speaking about your torso. Since your torso is a lot more upright in the sumo deadlift as opposed to the conventional deadlift, you can expect that your lower back will be not as fatigued in the sumo deadlift. And another thing about the sumo deadlift is that people would argue that you will feel your glutes more. And I do agree to some extent, just because the thrust is more, pronounced. But then if you were to really analyze how the conventional deadlift looks like, you are coming from a much more hip flexed, or coming from a more hinged position, which makes it a greater range of motion for your hips. So generally speaking, your glutes should also be activated to a good extent, and it is. But that's why it's hard for me to argue or to state which of the two variations actually stimulates the glutes more than the other, like which one does more glute work. And I guess that's something that I want people to really like. I guess following that, and to just go over this entire thing about stance width and grip width, don't fuss over so much in regards to, oh, this grip is gonna benefit me in this way, or this grip's bad for blah 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 blah. Don't fuss about those things. Actually, just to go on what I first said when I was trying to address this question or this topic, is that, dude, just do what works for you. Because no matter, even though if we get a black or white answer that this variation is better for you because this, that, even though if that's the case, but if your joints can't handle it, then that argument or that conversation is all for nothing. Because again, even though if you have this and this answer, if you can't do it, then it's all pointless. All right. So again, just to have a quick recap on what I wanted for you guys to absorb from this second question is that in regards to your stance width, grip width, do what works for you. All right. So now to go for the third and final one, which is for sure going to be the shortest answer. I mean, I'm hoping, I always say that, but here for sure about BCAAs, branched chain amino acids. Okay, so I've read a lot of studies about it, but I have definitely forgotten the most part of it. But because the gist or the conclusion that most of these studies I would have is that of current research, of most recent research, it's stating that BCAAs are kinda pointless or negligible in regards to your progress for both strength, hypertrophy, endurance, or any performance output that you might want to get. BCAAs are not that beneficial, are not beneficial at all, under the assumption that all your calories, especially your protein, are well accounted for. So if your calories are in check, your protein, your fat, your carbs are all in check, there might not be a significant benefit that you might get from consuming branched chain amino acids. All right, so in regards to it being possibly beneficial if you don't consume or if your nutrition is not on point, maybe. Again, I am not a scientist. I have just read journals in the past, but of course, I don't memorize it to the T. But generally speaking, as I said, if your nutrition is on point, you might not want to spend extra in regards to your grocery and your nutrition bill or your supplements bill to get BCAAs. But here's the thing, here's my own suggestion about it. I personally, for the past few weeks or months, I have been taking BCAAs despite knowing the fact that recent literature or scientific studies say that it is not helping. But the reason why is, I mean, aside from me, I'm pretty sure that my I can consume more protein, so that's why I'm taking BCAAs also, just to check it out, or like just to put the cherry on top of the entire cake. And obviously, the cake is the main thing. The cherry is just a supplement. And actually, just to go on the name or the category of supplements, supplements are meant to be supplements. They're supposed to supplement your current nutrition. That's the thing. The wording is very important. Supplements are not substitutes. They're mainly done, or they're mainly consumed on top of your assumed already perfect nutrition. Again, that's what supplements are. Whether it be BCAAs, protein, pre-workouts, etc. All of those things, or creatine, all of those things would mean nothing if you don't consume your protein, fat, carbs, calories, everything else, those main tenants for nutrition. If you don't have that in check, supplements are not going to do anything for you. Whether that be fish oil or multivitamins, sure, they are good on paper. For sure, on paper, they are beneficial. But if you're ignoring everything else, then of course, that's, pointless. But under the assumption that you are eating well, I think, I know, for me, again, in my own personal use, I still take BCAAs because while I'm training, I do want to have something sweet. And I know that's very underwhelming of an answer, or very anticlimactic, because you guys might have assumed or expected me to say, oh, but science this, science that. Yeah, I mean, sure, science this, science that, but practical use or practical application wise, I enjoy drinking something sweet while I'm working out or while I'm training, especially after like a top set of squat, bench, or deadlift, or after like main sets. It's nice to like take a 4 or 5 minute break just to sit down in the corner drinking a sweet ice cold BCAA that's fruit punch flavor, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure that you guys can imagine that. The image just sounds great. Like, you do feel more relaxed and you are getting a bit more hydration. And of course, certain brands, certain products are formulated differently. Some have a bit more calories, I think, than others. Some have different electrolytes or blah blah blah. All those sciencey chemicals, whatever, they're all different. But I still take it just because I love that it encourages me to keep my hydration in check during training or intra training. I mean, of course, everyone knows that water is super duper important, but there are times that just for me, again, me as a lifter, as myself, I just prefer having sweet and having something sweet to drink in the middle of training. And I personally don't want it to be soft drinks. I personally don't want it to be, what do you call this, flavored juice, like powdered juice. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, I guess, but it's just that if I don't have something like a sports drink like Pocari Sweat or Gatorade by my side, then BCAAs, which is going to end up being cheaper in the long run, just because you're buying a huge tub already. Then I guess the consumption, if in the Philippines, if I did the math right, per scoop or per serving, it would cost like what, 15 to 20 pesos if my math is right, as opposed to buying Pocari Sweat or what do you call this, Gatorade, Powerade, that's gonna cost you 30 to 50 pesos each time. Right, it's on an economic point of view, and just in a calming myself point of view, I take BCAAs. And even though if the science says that it's not that beneficial on the cellular level, I guess, but on the actual in the moment level, I see the benefit there. So I'm not saying that you guys should spend the extra money to get BCAAs, but what I'm saying is that you should make do with the science or the literature with however you think is going to be helpful for you. Again, the science says that BCAAs aren't completely helpful in terms of muscular growth, performance, and any outlet like that. But I take it just because I want to, and comparing to again buying a bottle of Pocari Sweat or Gatorade each time, it is a cheaper option to have. So yeah, that's basically it. Yes, okay, I think I did that a lot shorter. But anyway, those are the three things. That's the three questions for this episode's Q&A. Again, I'm not even sure with what the title of this podcast is going to be because of legal reasons, etc. Of course, we can fight against that. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this new format of it's not really a new format. It's a new layout, especially those watching via video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you're new to the channel, please do subscribe to the YouTube channel or follow the what? Follow the artist or follow the podcast on Spotify as well. Hope you guys enjoyed. Any questions, just feel free to contact me. You see my contact details below. See ya.